The Dallas Cowboys get a much-needed win in Week 12. We'll break it down on this episode of the Locked On Cowboys podcast.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Just visit FanDuel.com to get started. Welcome back. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. Joining me today, as always, is Landon McCool. You can follow him on Twitter at McCoolBCB. On today's show, we are breaking down one of the wildest Cowboy Commanders games in NFL history. The Cowboys finally get a win. They are now 4-7 on the season. They win 34-26. Landon, we're going to break down every aspect of this game. We're going to talk about why it was so wild. But I want to just start the show with this. For the first time since week 5, when they beat Pittsburgh, and it's not just because of the win, right? This was the first time that I felt proud of the Cowboys, to be a Cowboy fan. Yeah. And that's not to say that we're not Cowboy fans, but this I watched this game, and there was part of me that was like a little touched, like, hey, this team is fighting. I have a couple different TVs in my living room, so I've got games on all the time. I watched the Giants just lay down against Tampa Bay at home.
Yeah.
I've seen some other teams in the NFL, like New England, just they're not even competing at all against Miami. The Cowboys, with their top 5 players in terms of their cap hits, were out today. It doesn't include Tyler Smith, doesn't include Jake Ferguson. Went on the road and won a game that nobody thought they could win. I think you have to feel proud about this team.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, it's tough. We covered the team, but we're fans. Like, we are kind of in a very unique position with this whole situation in a large degree. Like, we're emotionally invested, but at the same time, we still have to get up every single day and talk about this team. And I think at a certain point, like, in order to cover it, like, especially when they're bad, it's like you have to kind of disassociate and, like, just be a little bit more analytical to kind of get through it and just to try to, like, figure out what's going on. And I think watching a game like this, like, it really broke through. I mean, first of all, just to see the Cowboys, the silver and blue versus the burgundy it's like it goes back to your childhood, taps into something, right? And I think and then because it was a game, because it was competitive, because they were out there like literally fighting at times. I tweeted this out at 5:17 left to go in the fourth quarter. It was a 13-9 game. It was a completely typical Cowboys Washington game in Washington. Like we've seen 100 different times on a terrible field where everything was sloppy and it didn't look right, but people were, teams were grinding things out. And then by the end of the game, it was 34-26. So in some ways it was partially just because of the pageantry. In some ways it was partially because of the effort that was put in there. And then finally, I think the fact that the game kind of completely changed gears in the last 5 minutes of the game, it became as crazy as it did. It really drew me in. It drew me back in a way no game this season has really.
And I just want to be clear. I know this Cowboys team is not very good. They're not going to the playoffs. None of that stuff, right? But it's okay to be proud of a team even when they're 4-7 because you like the way that they played and you like the way that they fought. And again, even if Dallas would have lost this game, if Washington would have went for 2 and they would have won this game in regulation, I would have felt the same way. Like, this team did not lay down in a spot where I think a lot of people assumed that they would. Washington had 10 days to get ready for this game.
That's right.
Dallas had 6. They were without both starting offensive guards, and they played a really fun and good football game. I think that's you can be proud of that.
We don't have a ton of time. We got to get to the actual game, but I do want to point out that I think, you're absolutely right. And to go back to a point you made, I don't know if it was earlier this week or last week, it's important for this team not to kind of let the loser's mentality kind of soak in. And I think games like this really fight that off, really stave that off. So kudos to this team. I was excited to watch.
Yeah, I understand everybody wanted the Cowboys to get a high draft pick. I was there today tweeting about it. But like for the players' sake and for the culture's sake, these wins are important because you don't want to turn into one of the teams and organizations where losing is expected, right? Like that, you're the Dallas Cowboys. You cannot have a culture of losing. Winning a game like this in the division helps. Let's big picture here. What else from this game do you take away? We're going to talk about the defense. We'll talk about Mike Zimmer and what he did in this game. What else are you taking away from the Cowboys beating the Commanders again?
The headlines here is that, first of all, I watched a halftime game recap that basically only featured the McLaurin touchdown and the missed extra point. Those were the only two clips they showed. I was like, what a gross misrepresentation of what a crazy game this was. I just, the first thing that comes to mind is how crazy special teams were for both sides of the ball all throughout the game. And then, obviously we're going to talk about these deeper, but the defense and the way they played absolutely was just absolutely nuts. But I just feel like it was, like I said, for most of the game, it felt like instead of this kind of high scoring affair where you felt like Washington was going to come in and score a bunch of points, it felt more like the classic gritty, grinded out running game, defensive game early in this game until it kind of broke open a little bit later. Yep. So it was a little bit of the old and a little bit of the new in this game, it felt like.
The other thing is the Cowboys continued to just shoot themselves in the foot all game long. I mean, honestly, they kind of dominated Washington. Even the very first drive of the game, the Cowboys went right down the field on Washington, and then they had the field goal blocked. And that set up Washington to have excellent field position. They went 7 plays, 17 yards, and got their first points of the game, 3-0. Cowboys moved the ball right down the field again, and then they had the missed field goal. Washington did nothing on offense their next drive, and then the Cowboys had a fumble. So if you're counting block kicks and missed field goals as turnovers, the Cowboys had turnovers in their first 3 possessions of this game, and they were still dominating this team going into the fourth quarter.
I have to tell you the truth. Even at the point, like when there's 5 minutes left to go in this game and it was 13-9, like I mentioned, at that point, I still wasn't sure that the Cowboys were going to win this game. I just felt like, they were just at some point, Washington was just going to break through with against the Cowboys defense. And this is all just to say that, like, it felt like for most of the game, the Cowboys offense was the most efficient offense on the field by far, way more so than the Washington offense. You just felt like at some point Washington's offense was going to break through, and it just didn't happen until way late in the game. And at the point where the Cowboys actually, it wasn't until the Cowboys actually got up by 2 scores that Washington's offense felt like it even came alive. So I would say, despite the fact that they did basically turn the ball over for their first 3 drives of the game, it's even though that was happening, it still felt like the Cowboys offense was the more efficient of the 2 offenses in this game.
Yeah. And before we go to talk about the Cowboys defense, we have to talk about Kevontae Turpin, who seems like every week now he's just making a big play. I mean, he had the long touchdown last week on the Cowboys' only touchdown drive of the game. Right. This game, 4 returns for 180 yards and a touchdown. One of the best kick returns you'll see since, I don't know, Woody Dantzler had one against the 49ers in the early 2000s. It was unbelievable once he gets into the open field. Kevontae Turpin proving to be pretty big weapon for this team whenever he gets the ball.
Yeah, I mean, like, I don't know. It almost felt like he kind of muffed the kick on purpose just to kind of draw people in. And the way he just kind of one-handed and then turned around, and it felt like he knew exactly that he was going to go one way, spin back the other way, and then find the seam and go up the field. That was absolutely incredible. I mean, just the and you knew as soon as he made the speed and there was the lane, it was over. Like because he had never gotten a lane like that that far up the field before, and that was going to definitely be the one that broke it open. We also need to mention Wanye Thomas's Randall Williams-esque return of the onside kick as well, just as another touchdown that can't be forgotten. What a great play by him, really redeeming himself on the previous play, if I'm not mistaken, where he gave up the touchdown on the previous play. But just some special teams wasn't always special for the Cowboys, no. but those 2 plays in specific were pretty great.
That's 2 mentions of the early 2000s Cowboys that were absolutely terrible. So Randall Williams, still the fastest touchdown to ever start a game. I just looked it up a couple weeks ago. So pretty cool. Let's talk about the Cowboys defense, which I know they gave up 26 points, and I know that Washington got a bunch of yardage late in this game. This was easily their best defensive performance of the year. Easily. Let's break it down next. This episode is brought to you by Hillsdale College. Time is our most precious commodity, so don't waste it scrolling through the same mind-numbing content for hours and hours. How can you spend it wisely to improve yourself? How about you check out Hillsdale College, which is offering more than 40 free, that's right, free online courses, including Constitution 101, the meaning and history of the Constitution, Introduction to Free Market Economics, The Great American Story, A Land of Hope, and the Rise and Fall of the Roman Republic. All of these Hillsdale courses are self-paced, so you can start whenever, wherever. Plus, you can go deeper with readings, quizzes, and discussions, or just sit back and enjoy the lectures. Go right now to hillsdale.edu/lockedon to enroll. There's no cost, and it's easy to get started. That's hillsdale.edu/lockedon to enroll. hillsdale.edu/lockedon. This episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the best place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in award winnings, PrizePicks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. All you have to do is pick more or less than at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. Run your game all season long on PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the best way to get action in most states, including California, Florida, Georgia, and Texas. It's also the only real money daily fantasy sports platform with an injury insurance policy, so your lineups stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. Sign up today and receive $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It is guaranteed. Download the PrizePicks app today. Use promo code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, download the app today. Use promo code LOCKEDONNFL. You'll get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We'd like to thank you for making Locked On Cowboys your first listen of the day. But let's talk about the Cowboys defense, because I don't think people really understand how good this unit was. I'm going to read you Washington's possessions going into, let's see, this would be going into the 5-minute mark of the fourth quarter.
I've got an interesting note at that mark too. Yes, let's go.
So 7 plays, 17 yards, field goals. That was after the block punt, block kick. So basically Washington did nothing. So field goal, missed field goal, punt, interception, punt, end of half, touchdown right out of the halftime, which was a great drive by Washington, punt, fumble. I mean, the Cowboys basically held them to 1 touchdown because the offense gave them a field goal. I thought they were outstanding on that side of the ball.
With 5 minutes left to go in the game, I think it was 5:19 or something, the Cowboys had given up only 208 total yards to the Washington Commanders. I mean, that matches what we were watching, right? Like, it just felt like at no point did this Commanders offense kind of really start to get going. They felt like they were achieving first downs here and there, but they weren't able to kind of, get anything more than a field goal. And they just felt like they got bogged down in the red zone, and then turnovers started happening for them. Yep. So it didn't feel like the commanders were able to throw in the kind of intermediate part of the field at all. Listen, we got to shout out a couple of names immediately. Josh Butler, like, what a game, right? Like, I mean, just really kind of making a name for himself and a couple of different key third down stops, some pass breakups on a deep pass down the field. And Chauncey Golston as well. Again, another guy continuing to really, show his worth and really it was played incredible while Parsons was out and while some other guys were out. And obviously Parsons, having a really good game himself. So I just felt like you got a lot of really solid play. It's just one of the things that now these injuries are starting to kind of heal back. You're getting a couple guys back, and it's raising, all boats, right? You're getting Bland on the outside, even without Trayvon Diggs, because you got such good play from Butler. You had Bland playing well. Yep. Jordan Lewis played another really, really incredible game. You got some good, decent safety play at certain points. It just felt like the Cowboys were able to kind of keep everything, contained. They made some big plays on third down. They were, preventing the pass. They were denying the pass. They were getting a pass rush when they needed to. Jayden Daniels was able to get, some broken plays and kind of get some big runs at certain points, some chunk plays.
I was going to say most of them came on either RPO or
Yep.
they ran a speed option.
That's right.
I think of that drive after halftime, and that gave them a big chunk of yardage. But I mean, any like traditional drop back passing attack, they did nothing.
Before I tweeted out at some point before halftime or at halftime, Daniels was averaging -1 EPA per dropback.
Yeah.
Like that. I mean, they just had nothing in the pass game. McLaurin basically had, I think, like one target for 1 yard or something like that. So yeah, I mean, the success they ended up finding was a little bit with tight ends. They started hit Ertz a little bit later on. But before that, and before they got their kind of running game going in the second half, especially on that, I think that first drive, if I'm not mistaken, coming out of the second half, they were moving the ball a little better. But
and I would even say about the run game, like the running backs didn't do anything. Austin Eckler and Brian Robinson combined for 14 carries for 35 yards. Like, you'd love that. Like, you know how far, how a couple of weeks ago that would have been like a pipe dream to have the Cowboys stop running backs there.
And that's Mozzie Smith again having another really good game. I mean, I went back and watched the TV copy again and tried to pay attention to him because it was noticeable in the game. The very first play of the game is him blowing up Biotish so bad that he ran Brian Robinson dead cold to the stop 3 yards behind the line of scrimmage, and then Osa, suplexes him and basically removes his knee. It felt like I was really worried about Robinson there. But yeah, like it was just, I think what you're getting is just better play at the defensive tackle play and it's at the defensive tackle spot. And I think on top of that, you've got Parsons back, you've got Nealon back, who also was playing a lot better. So it's, again, these injuries in the same way that they were kind of exponentially detrimental when they happened. Now that you're getting those guys back, it's like, this is a completely different defense than it was 2 weeks ago. And you're starting to see that. And that's why we were like tentatively excited to see them play. But I think even this was way above our expectations, especially in the first half.
Yeah. I just would love to see this defense one time with all their healthy corners, because Jordan Lewis played outstanding today. It was clear that Deron Bland was on some kind of pitch count as they try to manage him through this next, this they got a game on Thursday, obviously, right? We'll see if Trayvon's ready for this game, but you can see like when they have capable corners, you can see what a Mike Zimmer defense is supposed to look like, right? Like make teams throw the ball short of the sticks, get tackles, be aggressive on third down rushing. Like that's the way this defense is supposed to look like. But unfortunately, Lena, they haven't been able to do that all year because they've been so bad at the secondary and they've had so many injuries up front of the pass rushers that they can't get to the quarterback with 4 when they need to.
Yeah, I mean, that was actually almost kind of the insult to injury aspect of the Josh Butler stuff, because it was like, man, where were you just like even 3 weeks ago? It would have been great to have you just kind of play like this, like just a little while ago. But yeah, now that you've got, Bland coming back, and then you hope, Diggs' injury isn't serious or long-term, at some point you are going to get to see these 3 guys, your starting 3 corners play together. I think this season, I do believe it will happen. But I guess it's good to know that you've got a guy in Butler behind them if you need him.
Yeah, really good. I want to talk about the offense because this was probably the best game the offense has had since I don't know.
I don't even remember anything before the season.
It's been a while. I mean, it's been a while. Let's talk about Cooper Rush and the Cowboys offense next. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That is FanDuel.com. And remember, we've got 3 games coming up on Thanksgiving. We've got the Chargers and Ravens on Monday Night Football tonight. A lot going on, so make sure you check that out. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. For your second listen, check out the new Locked On NFL show. 2 shows every single day. 1 in the morning with Tyler Rowland, 1 in the afternoon with Tony Wiggins, available wherever you get your podcasts. All right, Landon, let's talk about the Cowboys offense because they scored 34 points in this game.
Yeah.
However, 14 of them came from kick returns for touchdowns. So if you really look at it, like 20 points. But they also missed 2 really short field goals, one which was blocked. I just thought the offense did, all things considered, with backup offensive guards in there, with your left tackle being subbed in and out of the game, with injuries to Brandon Cooks, with injuries to Jake Ferguson. I thought they played really well in this game.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, like for all things considered, considering the context of what you were playing in, we expected absolute disaster. And look, there was some disaster there, right? Like, obviously, we talked about the missed field goals, and then a fumble that, okay,
Questionable fumble.
That was questionable, the fumble, I'll say, because I do want to call that a questionable fumble because I want to sit here and heap a whole bunch of praise on Rico Dowdle right now because I thought that Rico Dowdle had his best game as a pro. The average 4.5 yards a carry on a team. This was a game we talked about that they needed to be able to run the ball. If you want to be able to play complementary football, you want to be able to help a defense that's still kind of, we didn't know at this point they're going to play like this. Yeah. But if you want to be able to be in this game, you need to control the ball because we just didn't know what we were going to get from this Commanders offense against this defense. So they came out with the game plan to run the football, and thank goodness that was successful because it did feel like it helped the pass game kind of get going a little bit. You saw a little bit more of the kind of crossing route, play action, bootleg stuff. You saw opportunities. When they needed to pass, they had the offensive line. They actually put Awesome Richard out there before he rotated in with Guyton. We'll talk about that too.
Yeah.
But they actually put him out there in a max protect situation so that they could throw the ball down the field. They had a plan when they needed to kind of block it up and be able to throw the ball down the field. They had to take deeper drops because I felt like they, as a staff and probably as a team, looked more comfortable running the ball with these young offensive linemen. I think that's probably what they felt most comfortable doing. And I think that's why you saw kind of the uptick and run. And frankly, you saw it was very successful that they were able to kind of get where they needed to go. They were sealing off guys. There were certainly times when Daron Payne was going to, go out there and kind of wreak havoc on a young guy. But I think for the most part, they were able to control the defensive line of the Commanders, do what they needed to do. Dowdle average over 4.5 yards a carry. And I think Rush only was sacked maybe 1 or 2 times.
Once.
And I think he was averaging something like 0.18 per EPA per play, which is what you expect out of a starting quarterback, which is one of the better. I think just one of the better games that you saw from Cooper Rush, where he was able to manage it, make the throws that were there. It wasn't perfect. There were times when he missed guys, but when the Cowboys needed a big play, the throw down the field to Brooks near the end of the half, he was able to do that at the times, and they were able to move the ball effectively. It was kind of scoring that the problem really was ultimately, but even that they were kind of able to solve a little bit at the end. And when they needed a touchdown, they were able to hit Schoonmaker for that touchdown just outside the red zone, and that's kind of when the game broke open.
A couple of just little nuggets and notes that I had from this game. First of all, Rico Dowdle had 88 rushing yards in this game on 19 carries, I believe. 19 carries. And his longest run was 9 yards, which tells you that there was just a lot of 5 and 6 yard runs in this game. And that's what you need. Like, Rico Dowdle is not going to be the guy that's going to hit the 50-yard home runs. He's not Tony Pollard. But what you want him to be is the guy that consistently grinds out tough yards and gets you in favorable down and distances. And I thought he did a really good job with that on Sunday.
Yeah.
Back to Cooper Rush. One of the things when you are a quarterback in the NFL is knowing when you need to make plays and be aggressive. And I thought Cooper did a really good job. There was a moment in this game, a couple different ones. I'm going to go through them. Right before halftime, the Cowboys are down 3-0. Everything went wrong for them on offense. And he has a 1st and 10 with 14 seconds left. And he throws an amazing ball to Jalen Brooks down the sideline. They kick the field goal going into half, 3-3. Going into half 3-3, considering you basically had 3 turnovers, your first 3 drives was huge. The next drive they had, Washington went right down the field, scored the touchdown, missed the extra point. So they're up 9-3. This is kind of the tipping point of the game. If you go 3 and out and you give Washington the ball back, you probably don't win. Here's how that drive went. You had Cooper Rush, 16 yards to Jalen Tolbert, 18 yards to Brevin Spann-Ford, a 24-yard pass interference to Jalen Tolbert. You had the Trey Lance play that lost 3 yards, and then they touchdown to Jalen Tolbert. Like, that is what a good backup quarterback does, is like, hey, we need to go have a drive. Let's go make it. I thought this was Cooper Rush's best game, obviously, this year, and one of the better games that he's ever played, just like knowing the situations. He had a bunch of plays called back in this one because of illegal formations and holding calls. I just very impressed by him.
Yeah, I mean, look, that all that Marcus just described, that was not the fourth quarter of the third preseason game that he was saying. This was a division game in which the Cowboys needed to score points on the road, and that's what made, again, you're right. That's what makes Cooper Rush's performance even more amazing than the years back when he had like a lot more stacked team that he was playing with, when it was just Dak that was hurt, right? Like, the fact that he's completing these passes to Brevin Spann-Ford to the key receiver on that drive was Tolbert, because they were double and triple teaming Lamb, obviously, right? Like, the fact that he was able to do that and put the points up when they needed to, with the people that he had around him, again, against a defense. I'll even take it a step forward, against a Dan Quinn defense that understands and knows this personnel as well as any defense in the league. Right. And so, like, it was just really impressive stuff. And again, I think the context of the game really is important to understanding, the performance overall.
All right, Landon, the last point I want to make about the offense. And again, we're going to have, I guess not really all week. We've got a couple of days to break down this game. Yeah, exactly. We'll talk about Tyler Guyton and the young offensive lineman. But one of the things that I wanted to see coming out of this game was, how do your superstars play? Because on a bad team, they set the tone, right? If your superstars are pouting and they look disinterested and they don't care whether you win or lose, it's going to create a bad atmosphere, right? We saw Micah Parsons, not only just this week, but the last couple of weeks, playing out of his mind, snap in and snap out. And I think CD has done that for the most part as well. But I think CD's effort in this game was awesome. I mean, you saw it on the play there was a play where he drew a pass interference call. It was Noah Igbenogany picked it off. CD goes and forces a fumble to give it right back to Hunter Olippi, in case they didn't call the penalty. It's those little plays from your stars and your leaders that you need to create a winning culture. So even if this season doesn't go the way the Cowboys plan, you want to see more of that.
Yeah. And look, I think, as we've talked about, it's important to have this culture. It's important to cultivate the culture and not like have it fall into a losing culture, like you mentioned. And on top of that, it appears that the Cowboys got a break anyways, that a lot of the guys that are the teams that are around them that were, vying for the bottom of the barrel to get the top picks, they won their games too. So I think this was an important game for the Cowboys to win, even if it did have maybe a slight negative effect on their draft pick, because in the long run, you don't want to be a team that, starts to ingrain and internalize losing as part of their culture.
By the way, the Cowboys only dropped down 2 spots in the draft order. They didn't lose much in this game. So enjoy beating your division rivals. Enjoy potentially beating another division rival on Thursday. We'll worry about the draft pick later. And again, I think I said this on Friday's show. Micah Parsons was drafted at 12. CeeDee Lamb was drafted at 17. Zach Martin was drafted at 16. Des Bryant was drafted at 24. Like, Cowboys have a history of getting some really good players, even when they're not drafting inside the top 5. So I think they'll be okay. All right. That is it for today's show. We want to thank you for making Locked On Cowboys your first listen every single day. Go download the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. We are free and available on all platforms. Follow Landon on Twitter at McCoolBCB. I'm at Marcus_Mosher. Enjoy this Victory Monday. And we will see you right back here on Tuesday.